So good evening, my dear friends, and thank you for the Prashant for the words of welcome. And the theme that I have taken for this year, New Year, joy and being joyful. And today is a joyous day. In India today we are celebrating feast of Makar Sankranti, Pongal, the festival of kites, Bihu, and throughout the country there is so much of celebration. And it is apt that on this day we are reflecting on the theme as Christians, as religious, how to be joyful in our own call. So basically, I will give initially how joy is explained in our scriptures, in our traditions, and in the present context, how we have been struggling to be joyful and what are the ways we could be joyful in our own life as religious, as missionaries, and as Christians. Yeah, this is the prayer or a poem composed by Joe Manath in his book, You Surprised Me. And this prayer gives us an understanding of what we need to pray for. Let me just read this prayer. Oh, my love, my joy, my unending happiness. Thank you for the radiance of this moment. Thank you for breaking down the timid walls of my heart with the gentle showers of your joy. Thank you for making me too great for this world and too precious to be forgotten by you. You are greater than my heart, and this joy I feel is but a small sign of your touch. Touch me again and send me out into your world as a sign and bearer of your joy. Joe Manath, a Salesian priest, prays for this grace, and he invites us to pray for this grace throughout our life. Joy is something very central theme in Christianity. And again, we have various quotations from the Bible which speak of joy. For instance, we read in the letter of John, we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete. Again, there's a reference to John. Your joy may be complete and incomplete in themselves. And even in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, we are told that we are given the gift of love and joy. And when we come to the letter to the Romans, we have this very beautiful passage. It begins with be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. And it later goes on to tell us the various virtues of hospitality, of humility, all that gives us the virtue or the grace of joy. So today, one of the grace that we can pray as religious is from somber devotion and sour faces, deliver us, O Lord. And I think that could be the grace because we are called to be joyful. We are called to be witnesses of joy, as Pope Francis invites us. And we are not called to be having people with sour faces, but to radiate their joy everywhere. And we have the example of Mary and Jesus, who were full of joy because they experienced in their own life God, their deep encounter. And throughout the life of Jesus, when we read the Gospels, his deeds, his works, his preachings, his feeling, his healing, through everything, he communicated one thing, that is joy. And that is why people wanted to follow him closely. And there are so many followers because he radiates that joy which emerged from his own Abba Father, because he knew that he is the beloved child of God. Not only in the Bible, even in the tradition, for example, many saints call us to be joyful. For example, the great theologian of the Catholic Church, St. Thomas Aquinas, he says, joy is the noblest human act. Philip Neri, he says, a heart filled with joy is more easily made perfect than one that is sad. and Teresa of Avila, who reformed the Carmelite order, nuns who prayed inside the cloister. She too says, a sad nun is a bad nun. I am more afraid of one unhappy sister than a crowd of evil spirits. What would happen if we hid what little sense of humor we had? Let each of us humbly use this to cheer others. I need to ask one question. Am I joyful today? What is my level of joy? Because we are called to be joyful witnesses. And this tradition from the Bible, from our saints, continues, especially even in the Second Vatican Council. And this year we are celebrating the Jubilee year of the inauguration of the Second Vatican Council that gave a new direction to the life and the mission of the Church. And even in that opening address, Pope John the 23rd, he said, Gaudet Mater Ecclesia, that means Mother Church rejoices. Yes, this rejoicing enabled the Church to find its identity, find its relevance. And that is why even in the council document, we have one of the beautiful document, Gaudium et Spes, the Church in the modern world. In it, it invites all the people of God, all Christians, to share in the joys and hopes of people of our times and to respond to the signs of times. And in our own times, we have Pope Francis. He has written so many, he has written encyclicals, given us apostolic exhortations, and the key theme in his own writings has been joy. So we have Evangelii Gaudium, we have this Amoris Laetitia that speaks about families, joy of love. When he wrote about the holiness, Gaudet exultates, there also he called us to be rejoicing and to be glad, because he knew the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and life all who encounter Jesus, and this encounter we need to give to other. Otherwise, we are, there is so much of prophets of doom everywhere. We are, having disasters, but at the same times, we can encounter Jesus and radiate that joy. Even within the Indian tradition, human beings are analyzed with the 5 layers, especially in the Taittiriya Upanishad. We hear, who is a human person? Is he a just material? Is he a just consciousness? Is he a just a mind and a wisdom? Through various layers, at the end, the tradition calls us to have this bliss, what it calls as ananda, to have that great joy. And that is the ultimate aim of the Upanishadic teachings, that you become a blissful person with great joy in your life and you radiate that ananda everywhere. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters, there's a need to recover the joy of our faith tradition. And we again and again ask this question, am I a joyful person? Have I had the encounter with God and with Jesus that radiates, that motivates me to be joyful? So what is joy? I would like to say joy from 3 perspectives. First of all, joy is a gift of God. It is something that is given to us. It is a gift of the Holy Spirit. It is given to us in various forms and ways that God visits us. And this joy comes to us when we do our prayer, when we do our meditations, when we celebrate the sacraments, when we encounter the poor, when we live in our community life. And this is given to us as a gift of God. Secondly, it is our identity. Why joy is our identity? We have just begun the ordinary year. Before beginning the ordinary season of the liturgical year, we were in the Christmas season. And in the Christmas season, we sang, Joy to the world, the Lord has come. And we also know the angels brought to us the good news of glad tidings. And when you go back, I mean, at the end of Jesus' life, after death and resurrection, again, we are given the grace of joy, because the greatest gift of the risen Lord to the people who encountered risen Jesus was peace and joy. And this gives us a clear indication as a Christian, our identity is to be joyful. Our identity is to radiate that joy. And thirdly, joy is a missionary enthusiasm and a fervor. We are called to do mission. And how does the enthusiasm come? Enthusiasm comes only when we have deep joy, and that fervor emerges from within. Pope Paul VI, when he wrote Evangelii Nuntiandi, a document related to mission, he said, there are many obstacles today in our missionary journey. We're struggling to do our mission with greater commitment. He said, yes, certainly there is lack of fervor. But he says, there is more seriousness, serious cause for a lack of fervor, lack of mission. He says, it is manifested in fatigue, in compromise, in lack of interest, and above all, he says, there is lack of joy and lack of hope. And this lack of joy and lack of hope has made us less enthusiastic in our mission. Certainly, there is a lot of truth in whatever he says. Pedro Arrupe, the general of the former general of the Society of Jesus, when he visited US, one of the American Jesuits seems to have asked, we are not getting many vocations. So how do you promote vocations? And how do you continue our mission? Pedro Arrupe told that Jesuit, live your vocation joyfully. Live your vocation joyfully, and you will have many vocations to the society, as well as the mission will progress. Yes, this is the gift. This is an identity. This gift enables us to do our mission with great enthusiasm and fervor. But however, we have, we are deprived of joy. There's a mistake there in the slide. What deprives me of joy, not what derives me of joy. What deprives me of joy? There is various elements in our life that simply deprives me of joy. I and you know that joy is our identity, joy is our mission, joy that makes me to go ahead in my life, and that is what the gift Jesus gave to us. Still, we are deprived of joy. Why? First is we are alienated. There is alienation or disconnectedness within us. We are called to build in our own life web of relationships. We are called to encounter God, encounter others, encounter creation. But because of our sinful tendencies, what we call, there is an alienation, a fourfold alienation of humans from God, from within oneself, and from one another, and from creation. And this alienation has created a culture of walls, what Pope Francis tells us in his Fratelli Tutti, and that simply deprives us of joy. Robert Bella, an American sociologist, he says, today in the world, we have this liberal individualism. This liberal modern individualism has created socially unsituated selves, he says, that today human beings seems to be disconnected, though they feel they're connected because of the social media and very various development, technological development and scientific development, they're still disconnected. There's so much of alienation and they are building walls. And even in our own relationships, For example, in our own communities, how many people know us deeply? Are we alienated in our own communities, religious communities? Have we disclosed ourselves fully to the other? Because if I reveal myself fully to the other, I'm going to be vulnerable. And that simply creates an alienation and disconnectedness from the other. And that simply deprives me of joy. And this has created a life without horizons, and we are going ahead with these walls. Walls will not give us joy. Only the bridges, connectedness, web of relationships will give us joy. Secondly, why we are deprived of joy? We have, Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist Vietnamese, monk who died last year. He was a great spiritual person, a Buddhist monk, and a peace activist. He says in his writings, human beings have the seeds that they have the capacity to grow. But we have seeds of both positivity as well as negativity. In our own consciousness, we can create a hell. At the same time, we can create a paradise. It all depends on us. But most often, we, with our own seeds of negativity, pessimism, we deprive ourselves of joy. We also deprive others of joy. Maybe one of the good exercise for us during this recollection could be to check what is my level of conversation. In a day when I talk to people, how much negative energy do I spread? Do I tell people things can be better? There is hope. Yes, there is so much of despair, there is so much of violence, so much of hatred, prejudices. But can we say in our conversation that there is something positive happening in the world? Can we have the positive narratives? Unless we have these positive narratives, we will spread only seeds of negativity, and that will deprive us of joy. Yes, we have stories, negative stories to narrate about politics, about economics, about church affairs, about our religious life. But those negative stories will not create joy. It will only deprive us of joy, and we will be kind of negative people. It's not only in our conversation, what we share with others in our own social media. What do we share? We are somehow, we are very curious to know about negative things. There is so much of curiosity within us to know about negative things than the positive things. And we are not very, enthused when people tell positive. We become very alert when we hear about negativity. Maybe to check for ourselves, if I need joy, I need to spread the seeds of positivity. Thirdly, why am I deprived of joy? Because I refuse to let go. Joy comes when I'm able to cast off, when I'm able to leave behind. It comes from letting go. Yes, for our survival, for our security, for our happiness, we think we need many things. But in life, when we let go, there is greater joy. Not only of our things, of our attachments, but also our own ideas, our own negative feelings. And to see, when do we let go? When we see things from a different perspective, when we see from another angle. It is said a photographer, when he cannot capture a scene properly, he changes the angle, he changes his positions, and he's able to get a very good picture because he's able to let go of the place that he stood. And in our lives, we need to let go to have joy. We are called to be a filter and not a sponge. A sponge simply accumulates things and does not let go. Whereas filter, it allows filtering of all things and make us grow forward. And when you don't let go, what happens to us is we are not able to um, kind of lose that joy. Fourthly, have we lost the sense of humor? To be joyful does not mean we are simply kind of not having any sense of humor, any lightheartedness, like jokes. Because we are told to be holy, to be faithful religious means to be with folded hands, eyes downcast, and a look that is not very joyful. Even rule of Saint Benedict to forbidden people from laughing. But when you lose the sense of humor, you lose joy. It is told in the life of Pope John the 23rd, Pope who inaugurated the Vatican Second Council. When he was elected as a Pope, as you know, he was a Pope with a huge body. After his election as Pope, he went out the streets of Rome. As he was walking around, a woman passing by told her friend, looking at Pope, "Oh my God, he's so fat and he's a Pope." Overhearing these remarks, Pope John the 23rd seems to have replied, "Madam, I trust you. I suppose you understand that the papal election is not a beauty contest to choose a athletic or a handsome person to be the Pope." In our lives, when we lack this sense of humor, a person who is humble is able to laugh at his or her mistakes and is able to take life not too seriously. It is said if you take life too seriously, you are seriously dead. And I think when you lose the sense of humor in our lives, we lose joy. And finally, we lose joy or we are deprived of joy when we lack insights into our life. What is insights? Insights is seeing what is there, seeing something with greater clarity and liberating ourselves from all the afflictions, the jealousy, the anger. Am I able to give new insights into my own life? Yes, my life may be at this moment miserable, suffering, having lot of difficulties. I may be suffering from internal conflicts, but a person who has insights will be able to see these things with a new perspectives and will be able to go ahead in his or own life with greater joy. Yes, we have so many difficulties to be joyful, but certainly this should not make us pessimistic. It should make us grow towards being joyful. And there is the process of being joyful. Henry Nouwen, in his book, Reaching Out, the three movements of spiritual life, speaks of three movements. And these movements, I think, would help us to be joyful in our lives. The first one, Henry Nouwen is a Catholic priest and a great theologian who wrote on spirituality, on psychology, and on pastoral matters. He speaks of three movements, and these movements certainly would make us joyful. The first is a movement from loneliness to solitude. Today, the contemporary society in which we find ourselves make us acutely aware of our loneliness. We have become increasingly lonely. we are living in a world where even the most intimate relationships have become part of competition and rivalry. And that makes us sad. That leads us to loneliness. But solitude will enable us to see the life, the world, the mission, not from a competitive perspective, but from the perspective of Jesus. When Jesus chose his disciples, he did not choose the most efficient people, most qualified people. He chose people who are able to carry out his mission with greater solitude and not with loneliness. And I think when we move from loneliness to solitude in our prayer, in our mission, we would be joyful. Secondly, when we move from hostility to hospitality, we will be joyful. What is this virtue? Today in the world we are growing, we have become hostile to each other for various reasons. That is the world that we are living in. At times we feel. But there are stories of hospitality. What is hospitality? He tells us in his book, it is our job to be joyful is to convert from hostis to hospice. That is to make enemies into a guest, to create a free space for others without any fear. When you create a space for a stranger, he or she can enter and he or she can become friends. And hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. And to be hospitable, people of hospitality, we need to reach out. God loves a cheerful giver. There is more happiness in giving than in receiving. And we have the example of people who give. I'm here in Delhi, and I'd like to give the example of two women whom I encountered in my ministry or field work. One woman is a Hindu. For the last 35 years, she is working. She is a person from Karnataka. She's working in Delhi for the last 35 years among the children of sex workers. And recently we started to collaborate with her in her work through our ministry. I was asking her what gives her joy, leaving her homeland there and living in that terrible place. There is so much of corruption, so much of violence, so much of despair. But she says, reaching out to these people gives me joy. There's another woman whom I met recently. She's from Manipur, works at JNU. She found a man who was infested with maggots and worms. She wanted to do something. She contacted us, this community here, and we helped her to put that man in the Missionaries of Charity home. And later I came to know this woman helps so many. She has remained spinster. She helps so many in Delhi, back at home, in her own village. Again, her answer was, what gives me joy is reaching out. Maybe it's better to ask for us, when did I reach out to people that give me great joy? And especially reaching out means self-transcendence. That is, I am able to transcend from myself, my selfish desires. It is not selfishness that gives us joy. It is selflessness that gives us joy. Thirdly, from illusion to prayer. What is prayer? Prayer is movement from the human shelter to the house of God. It is going from the known to the unknown, which makes us very vulnerable. Many a times in our religious life, we spend time in prayer. We attend sacraments. But all these moments may be sometimes, may be illusion. They may not be real prayer. Am I really enjoying my prayer that gives me so much joy? When I move from my illusion to prayer, certainly I will experience great joy. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters, today we are called to be joyful. And how do I become joyful? Certainly, from loneliness to moving from loneliness to solitude, from hostility to hospitality, from illusion to prayer, and much more than that. Not being overwhelmed by what is greatest, while still being attentive to what's smallest, that is divine. You know, we think at times doing great things gives us joy. No, the smallest thing can give us great joy. And if you do that with great love, as Mother Teresa told us, certainly we would be joyful. Secondly, each of us have a great power within us. Whether we like it or not, we have this power. John McCluskey, he is a professor at Boston College where I studied during my doctoral studies. He's a Buddhist, he teaches Buddhism. And he has written a book, Awakening Through Love and Unveiling Your Deepest Goodness. Yeah, I have put it, Our Goodness. The book title is Awakening Through Love and Unveiling Your Deepest Goodness. And in that book, he says, in each of us, there is deep goodness. In every one of us, we need to awaken them through love. And we need to unveil this goodness. At times we allow the evil, the pessimism to cover our deepest goodness. When I and you discover or unveil the deepest goodness by awakening, we will be able to be joyful in our life. And joy is both a decision and a surrender. Richard Rohr, a Franciscan American priest who writes on spiritualities, he says, as you do not create love, you fall into it. You do not attain God, you fall into God. You do not manufacture joy, you collapse into it when you give up trying to make it happen. Yes, it is a gift that is given to us by God. And life of Jesus told us how to be joyful. And what is the source of our joy and being joyful? More love, more God, more humanity is the source of our joy. During this recollection, let us ask, how much love have I got? How much God do I possess? And how much humanity is within me? If these things are within us, certainly we would be joyful persons and we will radiate that joy wherever we go in our mission. And may God bless us with that grace so that we may radiate this joy everywhere. Thank you.